powered by Reviting, streaming from the Reviting Digital Studio. It's the David Daily. Exploring frontier technology, artificial intelligence, quantum innovation, and the intersection of faith, funding, and the future. Here's your host, David Goki.
Welcome to another episode of the David Daily Show, and we have a special guest today on our Funding, Faith, and Future Tech segment, Michelle Urben. Welcome to the stage, Michelle. It's great to have you. Let's get you on stage. Welcome.
Morning. Hello from Washington, D.C., David.
Yes, bright and early, 11 a.m. on the East Coast here in New York, Washington, D.C., 8 a.m. if you're on the West Coast in Seattle. I'm excited for today's topic, Michelle, because we've got a lot of interested people. We've got funding topics, faith, and future. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself for folks just tuning in, who are you? And tell us a little bit about Synergos Fund as well.
Sure. Thank you. My name's Michelle Urben. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I'm managing partner and general partner at the Synergos Fund. We are a new construct in terms of a venture capital fund structure. We have as part of our mission, investing in industries that are persistently plagued. Energy, lack of electricity, food and health is an area of focus for us as well. And really focusing on companies that are in need of capital to strengthen our national and global supply chains. I'm also a mother of a 7-year-old here in the District of Columbia, and she already has in her vocabulary nuclear reactors. So very excited about our conversation today, David.
Wonderful. Well, Michelle, as you know, this show takes the format of 3 main categories: funding, faith, and future tech. So we're going to kick it right off.
Time to talk about funding.
All right, funding is our first topic. You're the chief partner of a fund, and you're bridging the valley of death in deep tech. What does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, I didn't expect myself to be in deep tech investing. I take a look back. I grew up and spent quite a few years in Saudi Arabia. My father worked for Aramco. He was a chemical engineer, and I saw I grew up in an environment where I saw the infrastructure needs, right? I may not have truly understood it then, but I've come full circle almost 45 years hence. We haven't been able to truly support companies and industries that help our day-to-day lives, right? Agri-tech is an area, is an industry where the valley of death happens more often than it should, right? You would think that investors would flock into agri-tech investments because these innovations will, use less water. That's a sustainable investment, right? The scarcity of water is addressed. Grow plants faster and better, right? You have quality produce. We benefit as consumers. And more importantly, the farmers benefit. I think in our food supply chain, I think farmers are quite, I hate to use the word exploited, but honestly, they likely get the thinnest margins. But if they had innovative technology that will help them with precision farming, right? So within the portfolio, we have OptiHarvest and Agrology, right? One uses light filtering technology so that sunlight, when it's red, apparently makes plants grow faster. Faster growing plants means more produce. You use less water, and margins will be less. And then we have Agrology with their sensor technology that allows you to predict pestilence and weather and just capture data on the health of your soil, so that the farmers in real time can adjust their farming methodologies, right? So we look towards, introducing these companies to our network of investors that indeed their dollar can really make an impact, right? And at the Synergos Fund with my co-GPs, Rabbi and Yehuda Moskovitz, we are very focused on being transparent to our investors on what these technologies can do. Your single dollar investment, your dollar should be able to make an impact, right? Not just for profit, but it should have. And I know we're going to be going into faith and investing for good, but these are investments. This is channeling and mobilizing funding to, again, critical industries and companies. It's notorious, right? It's a notorious valley of death. You have brilliant science that doesn't get funding. I'll give another one, right? By the way, this week is Climate Week in DC. It's the second year in a row that the district is putting this together. We have in our portfolio a company in California, Gate 5, which is in the waste to energy business. But because they don't fit the exciting mold of AI or space, largely this opportunity of investing in a company that is on the path to becoming a blockbuster doesn't get the support it needs. So again, this is how we, and I think you can see how we support our founders is really by not just having investors invest, but having investors connect to the story and to what we are solving. So there has to be a lot of work and creativity around getting funding for these companies. It's not just our LP network. What you'll see also with the Synergos Fund is the expertise that my partners bring to the table, which is accessing, from the U.S. government, non-dilutive funding for these critical technologies. And plus, look beyond our borders, right? Our technologies here have applicability, and in fact, are direly needed in our in other countries all over the world, right? You can have like our Gate 5 technology. Interestingly, in the last 3 months, the conversations have been with South America investors and industry players. So it's really, really exciting how we're addressing this funding challenge, but doing it in a way that involves and that encourages involvement from all stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. So it's kind of interesting, right? In the era where today AI and space may be kind of that hot topic, these deep tech industries where it's really sustainability as well. So why is most capital failing in deep tech? Maybe you can help us kind of understand the landscape of where capital has failed in the past.
It's the follow-on rounds, right? So which again, it's not really a failing, but I think the private investors, private industries, large corporations need to have visibility to these technologies so that we can keep improving and keep growing, right? Startups fail because they don't get that succeeding funding round, and this is where our investing structure, which is called the Continuum Fund, means that we will support our companies throughout their life cycle in as much as we can, right? Because that is the valley of death. You get the first 2-3 rounds of funding, and then the funding dries up. So again,
Right.
it's finding these strong portfolios. Again, we're on our first portfolio, but these are companies that we believe will become the Westinghouses of the world. We are there for them now and for the foreseeable future, not necessarily for an exit, but really to make an impact on electricity supply, make an impact on food supply, on health. And, take, for example, Curio. So Curio is the nuclear energy company within our portfolio. This uniquely was founded by my co-GPs, the Moskovitz brothers, and they research the nuclear space, right? the company has designs for small modular reactors, but the key here is we're solving, again, on the sustainability bit and the circular economy. Curio is focused on the recycling of spent nuclear fuel. And this is work over the last 4 or 5 years. And it takes a lot of work, right? It's not just funding, it's also regulation. It's addressing the headwinds of perception. So funding, it's not just the dollars, right? It's the conversations, it's actual policy. We're in an environment where, in fact, AI and the demand for compute. I mean, um, we are needing data centers to support this, right? But is there a better way to build data centers? Capture the extra heat. Again, this is, we don't function in a vacuum. All of our technologies really support the larger ecosystem of those industries, right? But it started with getting funding from the US government, right? It went through a pre-seed, a seed round, a bridge round, and now we're looking forward to a Series A round. But the Series A round largely is, for private investors to participate in an industry that is going to help us deliver baseload power, clean, as clean as you can get, and as consistent as you can get, right? But this is where I encourage private investors, right, to reach out to us, because we also have a model where we want to be able to accept all interested parties to participate in these companies, right? So Curio is a case study in this funding and how the Synergos Fund is using its resources to make sure that, and to show the world what investing in a circular world company really means, right? Gate 5 is the other one. You mentioned data centers and AI, David. And we are having a lot of conversations with data center builders. The Gate 5 technology addresses not a persistent, but an everyday thing, right? It is a challenger or a complement to wastewater treatment plants. But the beauty of this technology is it will process the waste, capture distilled water, and in working with data centers, it can capture that extra heat. And if it can capture that extra heat and use it to, run the plant, then we're helping data centers and heat large companies generating large amounts of heat. We're helping them address the concerns that citizens have in their communities, right, about excess heat and using scarce water, right? And again, this is the type of company where the Synergos Fund will take the lead, but we encourage investors to join us in this journey.
Yeah, thank you for the deep overview and insight. There's so many questions and thoughts I have, especially about small modular nuclear and sustainability and conscious capital. But before we jump all the way into that, I just want to start with kind of some basics. First of all, you started this Synergos Fund with your partners recently, just in the past 2 years. Tell me a little bit more about numbers in terms of the size of the fund, the typical amount that you look to invest into a startup, and the typical check size that you're looking for from an investor who may be listening and want to participate in your organization.
Sure. Structurally, we have created a hybrid evergreen portfolio. What this means is that we are always inviting investors to participate in our portfolio companies. We are in that first portfolio that I mentioned, largely focused on energy and agri-tech. We are a private fund, so the minimums will still be $1 million for accredited investors. But happy to answer questions on particularly if you've been an investor, you may not reach the high net worth requirement, but you are an expert in investing. These are other ways to participate in a fund like this. And also private funds can accept a certain number of non-accredited investors. But let me not focus too much on the minimums, right? Because I think with a collective, angel groups can come in, put their funds together in one vehicle and participate in the fund. With respect to the companies within this existing portfolio, we're fundraising. The next round for Acurio Access will be quite a bit of funding as well. We don't have a limit to fundraising, right? As we're done or complete with supporting our portfolio companies, we then create a next portfolio of companies to invest in. But these are large projects, right? A nuclear company focused on the recycling of the spent nuclear fuel of the US, that's going to need a lot of funding, right, to build a facility. So throwing out numbers out there is just going to be huge numbers, and I don't want to dissuade anyone interested. The point I want to say is that we're very welcome to having these discussions, because what we want are investors that are as caring about these companies as we are. Again, very transparent with our investors, right? To build a Gate 5 facility, that's in the tens of millions. To build a Curio recycling, I'm guessing that's hundreds of millions. But more accessible are the agri-tech companies, right? But again, these are areas that just have not gotten the attention, but where we think the opportunity and the instant tangibility of the impact can be felt. So yes, it is for high net worth accredited investors, but reach out to us. Let's have that conversations. The angel investors, if you have an angel group, that just makes accepting smaller investments easier.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Michelle, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate that. And by the way, we are live on YouTube. We have a little bit of a flex on YouTube. So if you're coming in from the David J. Goki YouTube channel for the David Daily Show, go ahead and drop a comment in here. We're talking with Michelle Urben, the managing and general partner of the Synergos Group. Really exciting stuff here. Topics that have not been on the show before, talking about sustainable and deep tech investments. So I'm really curious, what was the reason why you decided to start a fund? Like, when did you start to think, oh yeah, you know what, I want to start a deep tech fund in DC and really solve some of these, decade potential, maybe 3 decade long problems? I'm very fascinated with wanting to understand, like, what was it, Michelle, in your mind or in your soul that was like, I have to do this, and I have to do this now in 2024.
So this is going to become quite personal. I have to give the audience a heads up here. As mentioned
That's
earlier,
great. This is a personal show. I mean, this is not AI. We're not bots. Like, this is live. Like, we're having a conversation here about like how to start a fund.
I was 5-6 years old, and my father worked with the Philippine National Oil Company. And that became Petron in the Philippines. So I grew up beside a refinery. So my father was always in oil. And over time, we moved to Saudi. So I lived in Saudi Arabia. Like, literally, we were playing golf by carrying our own turf, right? I would follow my dad carrying his piece of turf over the sand so that he can tee off. But that's a fossil fuel.
That's funny, actually. I don't know if people heard that, but like, for the golfers out there, like, imagine you have to carry your own piece of lawn.
Well,
That's a whole new level of golf.
That was the 1980s, and in fact, Saudi Arabia has beautiful golf courses, is what I've heard today. But in the 80s, clearly my father had to carry it.
I don't think you could pay people enough in Palm Springs to carry their own turf. Anyways, so there you are, 5'6", going on 7 years young, playing golf with your father in Saudi Arabia.
And I didn't know what the carbon could do to our bodies, right? And we lived in that situation. And 25, 30 years later, my father passed away quite young from pancreatic cancer. And all of that, as far as our family is
Mm,
concerned, is really tied to that exposure
mm,
to the refineries, to the flares, and the carbon
mhm,
dioxide. Um, Serendipitously, I met the best friend of the CEO. The CEO of Curio is Ed McGuinness. I met his best friend of, many, many years, Eric Mejia. And he and I were talking about alternative investments and how to include alternative investments in portfolios. I come from the asset and wealth management world, and I'm a big advocate on financial inclusion, which is also why when it comes to um, investing in deep tech technology, I really want to get more investors aware and involved, right? So he introduced me to Ed, and then Ed told me all about this nuclear company. And yes, he talked about the reactors, and he talked about the overall ability to create a secure fuel source for our nuclear reactors here in the US by recycling our spent nuclear fuel. But the one thing that stayed with me was that as part of this recycling process, you capture cesium 131 and I think 137. And this has immense use for radiation therapy for cancer. So that was the only thing that stuck with me. And so with that, he introduced me to the founders of the company, Yeheskel and Yehuda, Rabbi and Yehuda Moskovitz, the brothers. And that really started this journey. So my husband and I became an investor in Curio during the seed round, very happy investors. Um, and it was really a meeting of minds with the brothers. They had already been investing for almost a decade through their Synergos family office, but they also had this realization that goes back to the key area that we've been talking about, which is this valley of death, right? So the brothers have, across their desks come all of these transformative, impactful companies, but the capital is the gap, right? So it wasn't really one thing, but it was a sequence of events and pretty fast in terms of how it all came together. It was a meeting of minds, and we created the Synergos Fund. And really, what a joy! We have investors, that we've known for quite a while. We have newer investors just automatically align. I think we actually know when they sit with us. We can sense that alignment. Yes, it takes a while to expand the network, and really we invite again everyone to reach out to us. But yeah, it wasn't one thing about the fund, but really we're here to bridge that gap, and it is a unique structure. We invest across the cap structure so that more just as an example, there might be other investors that are heavily invested in early stage, so they'd be more willing to support early stage if there's a late stage play within the portfolio. So that's why we invest across the cap structure. There's a particular formula for that. But again, our effort for the fund is really to connect investors with critical companies that need funding.
Yeah, wow. That's incredible. I like that a lot. And I'm seeing this trending a little bit, this idea of, okay, guess what? Well, we're going to come in with that early stage capital, but we're also not leaving. Like, we're here for the round 2 and the round 3, especially when we really have vision aligned with the founders, with the team, and as well with the mission and the critical problem that's being solved. And what's interesting is, I think in 21, 22, not to be too economical here, but we saw, lots of funding being infused, maybe overinflated prices, and we saw this massive kind of capital dip. So now people are needing to recapitalize across those stages. So I'm curious, actually, with Curio, for example, you back companies like this, which is tackling nuclear waste. So, like, what did you see in that funding journey before others believed?
There were a lot of signals for me, right? I'm Filipino American, and literally the year that I met Curio and the Synergos team, the Philippines signed a 123 agreement with the US to pursue and to learn how to build a nuclear energy industry. So in the Philippines, we spend 50 to 60% of median income in electricity. Here in the US, we don't even think about it. I mean, we might start to, but typically it's 1% or less, right? So that was one signal. Okay, so nuclear is clean baseload power, and with self-education and learning from the due diligence of Curio, as my husband and I pondered an investment, I learned that a lot of the headwinds of perception, Fukushima, 3 Mile Island, there's a lot of, I guess, information that is misinterpreted and was never corrected. So, going from fossil fuel to nuclear energy was a big jump for us, but we also knew that this is a way to help my country, the Philippines, to be less poor, right? If the Philippines doesn't accept, and I quote a gentleman in the energy and mining business in the Philippines, Chris. He doesn't know this, but I've been quoting him for 3 years now. He said to me, if the Philippines doesn't take or doesn't build a nuclear energy industry or capability, the Philippines will keep being poor for another 30 to 40 years. And that was a statement made from an entrepreneur almost 3 decades younger than me. So, anyway,
wow. Yeah, the impact, the cultural impact. I mean, so I'm half Korean and half German, and many people who follow me know this. My late mother actually immigrated from South Korea. And so, yeah, I definitely have that kind of cultural desire and passion for my people. In addition to that, she also did pass from cancer. And so, because you have that deep cultural tie and connectivity to the parent of the opposite gender, you now have this like very deep like purpose and why in your life. And until people go through that grieving experience, until you really understand the cultural impact and the legacy that you want to carry on for your own self and your children and your children's children, I mean, that's giving you a really deep perspective on investing and doing what's right for a long term. And I really like that perspective because it gives you a base to connect with your team, right? It gives you a real why. So I want to like tap into that just a little bit as we lean into our second area of topic, which, as you folks know, we have funding and we have faith and we have future. So we're going to get right to that next section.
Focusing on faith for a moment.
Awesome. Welcome to the David Daly Show. We're here talking about conscious capitalism in investment decisions with Michelle Urben of Synergos Fund. Michelle, conscious capitalism, why do you choose that phrase and why is that important to you today?
We are stewards of the world we live in, and we need to be conscious of how our capital is being used and how it is being deployed, right? We have investors very much used and strong entrepreneurs, so they build their own businesses, but not everyone has that capability, right? So at the Synergos Fund, we take our fiduciary responsibility to our investors. And again, it's not just this, it's not just the capital, right? We're stewards of this capital so that we can progress as humanity, as a people. And, being stewards of capital is no easy job. So I think when I saw your focus on faith, the first thing that came to mind to me is really faith in your team. We're a small team, we're a lean team. There's 3 of us GPs that share the burden. We have an investment analyst, and smartly, as a new fund, what we built in is also our platform to essentially leverage similar services across our portfolio companies where applicable, right? So we have Procurum, so CFO, HR requirements. We want to take that off the burden of these startups so that they can focus on the technology development, the client acquisition, and building a resilient revenue stream, right? So faith in your team is actually first and foremost. And that's, again, consciousness of how we as individual contributors come to the table, right? We're very conscious of that resource of our time and our heart. The second thing is, as a fund investing in portfolio companies, after a good diligence, everyone goes through their due diligence process. But I think as important as the technical is really faith in the founders. So this getting to know of the founders, we take so much time on that. We are never on the timing or the timeline of our founders, because we as a team have to be whole in our support for them. And so it's not just individual members, but it's the entire team supporting these companies, right? Because I think, obviously with Curio, that's the brothers, right? That's their, they founded that. But with the other companies coming in, we don't need to be best friends, but we need to have faith in them. We need to listen to them. And I think, we've heard of how venture funds or other investors come in and are not truly there to support founders. I mean, there are instances of that, right? And they bring in other folks to run the company. That's not our MO. Our MO is to bring the right ecosystem partners to the table. And then I think critically is faith in the ecosystem. Again, whether it's a capital provider, whether it's folks in policy in the industries we participate in, energy, agriculture, AI, of course, is something that we don't speak about it enough, but we know where AI fits into processing information when it comes to our agri-tech plays, to allow for that quickness in processing information for precision farming, right? So I think our philosophy is to be, conscious capitalists, to be stewards not just of the capital, but of progress. And we have to advocate for ourselves, right? The structure of our fund, we're a new fund. The structure of our fund is unique. We're investing in technologies, deep tech technologies that may not have that great support as a late stage company, right? Late stage, people want to come in at late stage because it's largely de-risked and they can get a 3 to 5x return on it. We invite all our investors to come in with us for the long term, but we are long-term investors, but we also have an eye to returning and having distributions to our investors in the medium term, because and we return. Yes, we're an evergreen fund, but at distribution we return the funds to you, and if we've done a good job, we hope that you'll keep investing. So the fund is not just for one portfolio; it's we're building this for legacy, to keep investing in these foundational industries, and in a way, it's becoming a nice conversation for our investors and their heirs to participate or to become more knowledgeable on investing in these critical industries. And I have a few examples of that where, one of our investors, their team, their group has been in the energy investing space for decades. And, now the daughter is here in DC and just really, we're here to bridge that gap, because at the end of the day, they are investing in the fund. So there is that capital and that generational wealth that we want to support them in. But again, this, it's resource circularity across everything. And that's any resource.
Yeah, that's so good. I really appreciate your unique take on faith. I mean, people can describe faith in all sorts of ways, but I heard you say, faith in your team. That's the first thing, so important. And then faith in founders, and then faith in the ecosystem. And especially when I'm hearing you say we really need to educate not only investors and founders, but the general public on the long-term sustainability needs of deep tech. And when you apply that to generational legacy and family offices, family funds, or groups of investors who may not be blood related, but in in um, in Korean culture, we have this word for like a family uncle, right? Oppa is kind of that uncle in the family who's not maybe blood related to dad, but always like there and really part of the family. So my next question when it comes to faith and being head of a fund that's a long-term fund that's applying to generational families, how do you align values across parent and child relationships where maybe there's a transitory period where the older or the more generationally wise family members are now kind of passing that baton on to their heirs? What is that like, and how do you kind of facilitate those differences in personalities, especially when they're in person and you kind of want to make sure that you're you know returns to all the people in the ecosystem, but also catering to different personalities and different values?
I think it really comes to the personality of the fund. We share a lot about what we're doing. And again, we invite all of our investors to be as participative as much as they want. Some investors don't need to know the technical details, but there are many that actually, as they understand the technical details, they then see how it is relevant to other aspects of their lives. Now, when it comes to generations of investors, their families, I always at the first meetings, I always share this with them. Like, if you get information from us, share it with your children, right? I'll tell you, my daughter, she was a COVID baby, and as I was getting to know Curio and the Synergist team, we would be on Zoom calls, and she would see a small modular reactor or hear those words, and she put the barrel of a cement truck in Lego world, Lego blocks. She actually created a reactor and put it on her Lego city. So I think it's exposure. I think the old generation, which I come from, I'm well into my 50s. We left the investing to a parent, right? And their want for us and the work that they did was to make life easier for us. But we were not aware of many things. So this is what we talk about, and what I talk about a lot on financial inclusion. It's not just financial inclusion, it's financial/investment transparency. And I think I'd love to encourage families here, friends, siblings, to talk about what they're focused on, to talk about what they're doing. I'm a very open person, and I love connecting ideas and people. But I think this generational wealth and appreciation of what our parents have built can only happen if there is conversation. So I think communication is a vital ingredient in ensuring that one, we appreciate the work and the contributions of our elders, but also for the reverse works, right? For us to be open to the insights and the views of the younger generation. So yesterday here in DC, there is a group called the Young Professionals in Energy DC. I work a lot on the ecosystem building here, and in partnership of a civic group that I'm part of, the DC Tech and Venture Coalition, we supported them in their launch of their mentorship program, right? There were 20 mentees and 20 mentors in energy that were matched. And this is really where that continuity is supported, right? Yes, it's specific to energy, but it's not just passing on the baton, right? Because if they can get to a research topic to work on together right away, then you have different generations working on a similar challenge and working on it together. And then you create kind of like that pathway for careers, for for insight exchange. I think mentorship is one of those areas that no one ever told me how helpful and how useful it would be. I mean, mentorship came to me in my 30s, but yesterday we had individuals in their first 5 years of corporate experience getting insights from a 20-year DOE consulting and other companies, right? To be there as their resource, as their knowledge source. But again, this is reciprocal. It goes both ways, right? So communication, education, these are all necessary. And I think the world is complex enough, but perhaps this is something that we can all implement, is really having conversations around what we do. Because what do we talk about a lot? It's what we love, right? So if we listen to each other, talk about what each other loves, I think there'll be ways to collaborate.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that. Conscious capitalism, I'm hearing, is it's education, it's communication, it's collaboration, both intergenerationally, but also sustainably as well. And I really like that example you shared about how your daughter was kind of sustainably and consciously putting a nuclear reactor next to her Legos, even at quite a young age. And that actually is a good segue into our third segment, which is future and future tech.
Let's talk about quantum and the future of technology.
Welcome to our future segment. We're talking about deep tech and frontier technology with Miss Michelle. This is such a wonderful conversation. I'm so excited that we're having it here in 2026. We're both young and half Asian. We have a cultural connection here, as well as we're very passionate about sustainability. And so when you're looking into the future, how do we invest today for tomorrow's future?
Invest across the opportunities, right? At the Synergos Fund, we talk a lot about investing in companies that are bedrock, foundational companies, nuclear energy, agri-tech, waste to energy. And then you have the other further side there, which is everything around AI, quantum, a lot to absorb there still. And I think that's going to be another conversation, David. But in truth, they both come together, right? Which is really protecting our vital resources. So it's maybe I'll use to get through to one clear example, right? So that brings together our portfolio companies. So Curio is hopefully will be recycling our spent nuclear fuel. Will have its own small modular reactors. That's going to help power up what AI needs, what quantum compute needs, which is consistent base load power. And what I'm learning is we have a certain demand for electricity, but actually we need to also build redundancy, right? Which is why investments in battery technology is critical, right? We also have existing other renewable energy sources where the use of AI to model how to create batteries better and faster can help, right? And then on the AI piece, we have demand from our large tech companies for that compute power. So if we build and invest in the energy, and if we invest and help our data centers supply that compute power that our large companies need, that's just going to propel us and accelerate all the new technologies, all the new innovations for us to still discover, right? So we're still supporting that. We're creating technology and still discovering technology. But really, the investments, I think, and I know people tend to invest in what they know. I think have a curiosity about how different industries come together. In any company that the Synergos Fund invests in, we want to create a durable company. And again, we want to become we want our companies to be, not necessarily public, but, companies that are known to be delivering for the citizens of the world, right? Providing electricity, helping provide better food, and, so I will connect it to the agri-tech companies, right? So our agri-tech companies have AI that they're building into it or already built into it. So again, what we're investing in on one end has an actual relevancy and impact on an agri-tech play, which may not be as clear cut when you first look at a company. But I encourage everyone to take a deeper look into all of these different companies. I know it's hard to be a generalist. It's also hard to be a specialist. But I think, again, conversations. Let's have these conversations. The Synergos Fund is very open to having these conversations. Nicole is our analyst. She sits in New York. Always the one. If you hear from her, she's the one that is tasked with reaching out to the world and really sharing what we're doing at the Synergos Fund on a day-to-day basis.
Wonderful. Well, I'll definitely have to get connected with her, being based in New York as well myself. But I want to get a little bit deeper into the future piece here, because there's, I think, some specialty things that you have here. And maybe we can both stay on screen here just to have more of a conversation here a little bit. So talk about regulation, right? How should founders navigate regulatory timelines versus fighting them, especially in deep tech?
Yeah, and I sit in Washington D.C. and I wasn't always here. We moved to New York here from New York 6 years ago. It's interesting because people talk about policy and regulation here with such ease, and
Yeah.
I did not experience that in living in other parts of the world. I think
Mhm.
have a clear pay attention. Follow regulatory moves.
Right.
Awareness, information, I think, is key. We also know that with changing administrations, focus of these, our government's focus could change from administration
Right.
to administration. But I think it really relies on us as private investors and as entrepreneurs and as private citizens to
Mhm.
bridge the administrations, right? At the end of the day,
Right.
this is our government.
Right.
So I think align with the direction of where the policy is going,
Mhm.
but again, stay aware of where things might change.
Yeah.
We see this as the Synergos Fund because we're milestones based investors, right? So we are keeping ourselves abreast of regulation of commercial developments. It is not easy, particularly for newer technologies. Even in the recycling of spent nuclear fuel, we've talked a lot about it a lot. Curio has been working with the national labs of the Department of Energy,
Mhm.
but we have yet to have finality on regulation. So I think it's just really staying aware and in a lot of ways advocating, right, for your company and for the regulation that you need.
Yeah. So founders can design around regulatory timelines by having someone on the ground, like yourself, being in the city, in DC. Second of all, is being aware and integrated into the regulatory direction once you have that knowledge and understanding. And then third is design your milestones around potential regulatory timelines that will move forward in alignment with your company. So I like that. Okay, so question about supply chain. So supply chain bottlenecks happen all the time. Obviously, we see socioeconomical, global politics, all sorts of things associate with that. So maybe in just 30 seconds, where do supply chain bottlenecks break deployment with respect to materials, permitting, and or labor?
For our agri-tech companies, the supply chain breakage really comes around components.
Mhm.
Accessibility to components to build their technology. But again, this is
Mhm.
part of the planning, the critical planning, and always having options. So
Right.
cost is a big thing that really kills startups.
Mhm.
CGS is a big part of that.
Could you
Um,
give us an example of like a component that's had some sort of bottleneck and what impact that had, maybe for other investors who are experiencing this with supply chain bottlenecks? I mean, tariffs and other policies can add bottlenecks, simple distribution internally, global pandemics and disease. I mean, there's who knows what's next, right? So,
well,
what's an example where you had that bottleneck?
yeah. So one of our agri-tech companies, Agrology, and again, it was thankfully minimal. But this is during the
Good.
tariffs with Switzerland. They were sourcing a component of uh, the sensors from Switzerland. So that was kind of a
Mm,
little bit of a shift. But then again, being prepared to have other options to source and having, I guess, better contracting terms, preparing for these types of potentialities. Not that we want it to happen all the time. I think is critical. And again, this is really giving your faith in the founders that they have addressed all possible
yeah.
scenarios so that supply chain breakages will not be a very detrimental impact to their operations.
Awesome. Okay, two more rapid questions here, and then we'll go into our rapid fire round and then our beyond the bag. This has just been an awesome conversation. So, in ag tech, without getting too political, how do you underwrite climate volatility into ag tech investments?
Without getting to it's DC Climate Week, so I was going to answer with the carbon credits. I think focus
With
on
carbon credits, nice.
I think focus on what agri-tech companies can deliver to the end consumer, better products. I think we don't need to get too political on how these agri-tech companies can
Make better products. No, that's
make.
a great answer. Just make better products. I love it. And what metrics do you feel like prove durability beyond a single growing season for sustainability and longevity for ag tech?
Yeah, so contracts secured for the long term, and just really
Long-term
happy
contract.
clients. Right? At the end of the day, happy clients, the industry talking about you, and Yehuda says this all the time in agri-tech, it's word of mouth, right? So we're
Yeah.
thankful that our agri-tech plays are very well known in the industry by large players, wineries, and such.
Awesome. Okay, well, that it wraps up our future segment. So thankful that we had such a good conversation. I mean, you can't cover all of nuclear and ag tech in 20 minutes or 15 minutes, but we certainly did our best. So here, what we're going to do now is a rapid fire round. I did not tell you about this on purpose. It's 3 stages, very quick. Just speak first what comes to mind. First stage will be very easy, more fast, instinctual. Second will be a little bit with a short answer, and then third will be maybe a little bit more of a perspective. Okay, are you ready?
Hit me.
All right, let's do it. Nuclear or solar?
Nuclear.
Hardware or software?
We're in deep tech, hard tech, hardware,
Long-term or quick returns?
long term.
Government support necessary? Yes, no?
Yes,
US leads deep tech.
absolutely.
Okay, awesome. All right, you didn't do too bad. That's great. I'm very confident. All right, round 2. One sector that you're most bullish on right now,
Nuclear.
and one sector that's overheated.
SaaS, anything SaaS related.
Where do most investors get deep tech wrong?
Too slow on nuclear.
And what earns your trust fastest in a founder?
Transparency.
Breaks trust fastest?
Not advising, not informing.
One advantage great operators have over pure technologists.
They're well rounded.
All right, awesome. That was great. You did awesome. Level 2. All right, level 3. What belief about deep tech investing do you hold that most VCs you think would disagree with?
I'm not sure that they necessarily disagree with it, but failure is not the end, right? You course correct.
Yeah, good. Okay, how do you know when to stop funding a technically sound but commercially struggling company?
I think we don't stop, right? We just we either recapitalize or restructure.
Yeah. What will expose today's tourist investors in deep tech?
What will encourage them to come here? What will interest them?
No, what will expose today's tourist investors?
When they don't come in for the next rounds.
Fair enough. That's good. Yeah, exactly. And where do you see the biggest misalignment between capital timelines and reality?
The need for a quick exit. That investors have been miseducated on the need for a quick exit for impactful companies.
Right. And then final rapid fire round, level 3. What separates founders who survive the valley of death and those who do not?
They work 24/7.
24/7. Figure it out. We could sleep when we die in that valley of death or get past it, right? Now I love it. All right. Final anchor segment, one of my favorites, Beyond the Bag.
Let's talk about
Beyond the bag, beyond the bag, beyond the bag. All right, Michelle, this is my personal favorite. I have no idea where you're going to pull out of your bag, but I've been traveling full time for the past 2 years and doing so with a 15-liter bag, so very small. So I'm always curious, what does a VC fund leader have in her bag? And she's looking right now.
A moisturizer spray.
Wow, we have never seen that. Okay, moisturizer spray. All right, I love it. So you do not travel without this. Tell us just a little bit more about your facial moisturizing spray.
Yeah, so traveling and just really running around, it gives you that boost of freshness just by hydrating your skin. I don't wear much makeup, so this is kind of my dewy look magic.
Your dewy look magic, nice. I have not shared this before, but I have a little Asian container that holds all of my toiletries. So this is all I need for my toiletries, very small. And your moisturizer reminded me of that. Okay, folks, thank you for tuning in. This has been a wonderful conversation. Michelle, what is the best way for people to get connected with you and Synergos?
Sure. Follow the Synergos Fund on LinkedIn and send us a note there and we'll get back to you.
Easy, simple. Well, let's do that, folks. Let's all follow Michelle Urben, and you're going to see her over the next 20, 30, 50, 70, 200 years, generationally speaking, making an impact on deep tech and sustainability.
Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you in person, David, soon.
Sounds good. Bye-bye, everyone.